Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is kind of a combination of nutrition and training, and we're going to kind of cover how to increase strength while losing body weight. So when we look at the goals of each, so if I want to achieve fat loss, typically we're going to have a caloric deficit. Now that's either going to be a deficit from us eating less or us moving more. But we have to have some type of caloric deficit. So that way our body is encouraged and kind of it's necessary to burn off stored body fat, stored energy, to make up for the energy that we're missing in our diet. So the other goal we have here is to actually increase strength. So how do we do that? That is related to kind of nutrition, is we have to make sure we still have enough calories to recover from our training. So that's what we're going to be discussing, and we're going to discuss some training techniques that help us achieve this, as well as nutrition, obviously, but that's why it's kind of a combined goal. So we have the goal of fat loss, and we have the goal of increasing strength. Each of those have their own necessary components. How do we kind of blend the two together so that way they don't work against each other, but they actually work in harmony? So the nutrition concepts we really want to look at is the first thing we want to think of is meal timing. So we did a more in-depth podcast, number 249, on meal timing. But what meal timing is essentially, I want to make sure I'm eating enough calories when I'm most active, and then less calories when I'm less active. That allows us to maybe have a net caloric deficit overall. So if you think of every 24 hours in a day, we can spend more hours of those days in a deficit than we would in a surplus. But we still want to have a surplus around our training so our training goes well. So what we can do is, most people think of like having a caloric deficit as, unfortunately, most people consider nutrition as like, each day I do this. No. So nutrition is like every hour, every minute. So you can do something different to your body every hour of the day. So I can spend 2 hours of the day kind of building muscle. I can spend 2 hours of the day losing fat. I can spend 2 hours of the day doing this. So what unfortunately most people think of is, when they think of losing body fat, they just think of, well, I normally eat 3,000 calories. I guess I'll just eat 2,700 today. So I'll go down 300 calories. And then you just kind of space that out throughout the day. No. Okay, that's less efficient. So it's not as good. So what ends up happening is it would be better for us if we think of our activity level. Let's go with a simple bell curve. So I wake up in the morning. I'm obviously not very active. I just woke up. I start getting more active throughout the day. So you think of the curve going up, and then we're kind of peaked active in the middle of the day, and then we kind of taper off towards the end of the day. Now, obviously, if you have workouts in there and you have a different schedule, blah, 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 it's going to change some. But let's go with that concept of, throughout the day, we have times when we're less active, and we have times when we're more active. What we'd like to do is divide our calories up to match that curve. So rather than me eating, say, 5 meals of 500 calories, which is a flat line, if at the beginning of the day I really don't need 500 calories in a meal, I can take 200 calories away from that meal at the beginning and the end of the day, and I can add 200 calories to the meal in the middle of the day when I'm more active. It's going to get me a better match to my activity level. So that way at the beginning of the day I'm not overeating, at the middle of the day I'm not severely undereating, and then at the end of the day I'm not overeating. So that's what would happen if you did a flat line caloric balance. So you're going to start the day in a little bit of a surplus. Then during the middle of the day, you're not going to have enough. Your body's going to be super stressed, kind of pissed off because it didn't have enough food. And then at night, when you eat a little too much more than what you really needed, it'll save that excess for body fat to protect itself the very next day. So even though you're maybe having a nice kind of balanced caloric intake throughout the day, you're actually having periods of overeating and undereating. So even though your calories look flatlined, your activity was not. So therefore, your experience in your body is not flatlined. It's not normal. It's not consistent throughout the day. If we better match our meal timing to where we have more of our calories around our workout, and we have less of our calories away from our workout, it'll still give us an overall net caloric deficit for the entire day as a whole, but it'll give us enough calories to perform well in our workout. to get the maximum stimulus we want out of our training. Therefore, you can do a better job of actually increasing strength. Not only holding strength, but increasing strength. So that's the benefit and the importance of meal timing, is making sure our calories match our activity levels of the day. They're not just kind of flatline balanced throughout the day. Okay? The other thing we have to think of is kind of macronutrients, is which type of calories should I have around my workout. Okay? So that's what we want to think of, is if I eat a bunch of fat in my diet, so dietary fat, and then I try to work out 20 or 30 minutes later, I'm going to feel horrible because my body has not been able to break down those calories yet. So fat is a very slow digesting nutrient. It takes time to digest. So if it takes, say, 2 hours for my body to kind of break it down and really start getting energy from that food, and if I eat it and then try to be active in 30 minutes, yeah, that food's in my belly, but that does not mean it's in my bloodstream. Okay? So you have to make sure that you eat around your workouts. If you're going to eat more calories around your workouts, you need to eat calories that are they're faster digesting. So they're highly available. So you would actually eat more carbohydrates before and during your training. Now, typically what happens if somebody's trying to lose body fat, and they're going to villainize carbohydrates, and they're not going to try to eat any of them. They're going to say, I'm doing low carb. Well, you're going to have low performance. You're probably going to feel like shit, okay? And you're not going to perform very well. Whereas if we go ahead and have carbs to where the calories we consume around our workout are actually digesting and available to us during our workout, we can have a controlled amount to make sure there's not in excess. So if I do a workout that, say, typically burns 400 to 500 calories, well, as long as I only have 400 to 500 calories of carbs, I'm fine. I'm going to perform really well, like a full gas tank. But I won't have to worry about excess that would impede or impair my fat loss progress. So the key is to go ahead and have carbohydrates. Go ahead and fuel your body to be active. But make sure you do it in just the amount needed. Now, how would you know this kind of stuff? Is we've gone through before about how to set up meal plans and how to set up diets and how to change, all this stuff. But in general is, if I take a big fat guess and say, okay, let me, have 300 calories around my workout. I have a good workout, and let's say somehow you magically didn't lose weight that week. I doubt it's from the 300 calories, okay? But that would be something you consider. Maybe instead of 300, I only go 200, something like that. So what's more likely is that somebody will say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and have carbs before my workout. I'm going to go eat such and such food that's ridiculously too high in calories and end up having like 800 to 1,000 calories. And then you sit around doing piddly crap while you're trying to train, and you're just kind of BSing with friends, doing some heavy stuff, but not really doing much. So you maybe only burn 300 calories. So you have a 1,000-calorie meal and 300-calorie workout. Doesn't match, right? So then if we see that we're not making progress in our fat loss, then we know that we have to reduce that meal. So 300 calories is never going to get you really much trouble around your workout. So just kind of using kind of trial and error. And if you're really, really cautious and you really worry, then just try having 100 calories in your workout, like an intra-workout drink, okay? See how that feels. If that feels good and you're not impairing your fat loss, go to 200 calories. So just start adding it in small amounts rather than taking maybe too big of a swipe at first, okay? So you can just do it in small amounts. So that's one concept we have, is meal timing, making sure our calories match our activity level throughout the day. Don't just have a blanket balanced caloric intake in every meal of the day. Make sure you eat more around your training, eat less away from your training. Then your macronutrients, meaning what should you eat around your training, should be more carbohydrates and proteins. Go ahead and have the carbohydrates. It's not going to impair your fat loss as long as you keep the amount in control. Then the last thing we have is protein requirements. We know we have to have protein for recovery. So even if your goal is fat loss, do not take calories away from protein. Take calories away from fats and carbs. So we've done a podcast number 33, about how much protein do I need. So in general, that'll give you the range of 0.6 grams to 1 gram per pound of body weight. So if I weigh 250, I would eat around whatever the hell 0.6 of that is. I just screwed myself into some math. Let's see, that's 150? Yeah, so 150 to 250 grams of protein, something like that. So that's where you'd range. So if you train, say, 4 hard workouts a week, you could probably be up like 0.8 to 1. If you only train like 3 times a week or less, you probably want to be more around 0.8 to 0.6. So I have had people in the past, say, well, about 300 pounds, I'll eat 300 grams. And it's like, nah, you're not training that often. You probably don't need that much. So it's a little bit of give and take. And go ahead and listen to podcast 33. That'll tell you a little bit more about how to better decide where in that range you fall. Okay? So those are 3 things that we want to think of when it comes to nutrition with the goal of increasing strength while losing body fat. Okay? So I'm trying to keep this simple and things that we can kind of comprehend and actually put to practice. So are there more nutritional things? Oh, hell yes, there are. But I will get way too lost and it'll be way too detailed. So the 3 that I want you to really focus on is meal timing, making sure that you eat less away from your workouts, eat more around your workout. Then we think of macronutrient like intake. What should I eat? It's mostly proteins and fats away from your workout, proteins and carbs around your workout. Okay? And the carbs won't impede fat loss as long as you keep them under control. And then make sure we have protein. So you want to be having protein about every 2 or 3 hours, even maybe 3 or 4 hours. You just want to have protein often, every meal of the day. Okay, make sure you have enough protein. Don't decrease protein on non-training days. Don't try to save calories by reducing protein. Okay, so if your goal is caloric deficit, make the deficit through fats and carbs, not protein. Okay, cool. So that's some nutritional concerns. Now, when it comes to training, the big thing we want to look at is if I want to increase my strength while I'm in a caloric deficit. Another way of saying that is I want to increase strength while I'm in a recovery deficit. That's pretty much what happens when you reduce calories, is you reduce your recovery ability. Okay? So if we think of that, and I say, okay, how am I going to get stronger when I can recover from less than what I'm used to? Right? So what we can think of is how to streamline our training. So we want to reduce what we do in our training to the most important, most efficient things. If I do less, I will have less to recover from, right? Well, since my recovery is lower than normal, my doing should be less than normal. Now, that doesn't mean we have to sacrifice quality of results. Actually, on the contrary, I'd argue you're probably going to get better results. So what this will do is this will force you to take a deeper look into your training and say, okay, out of the 10 things I'm doing, do I really need all 10? And maybe, like if I look at exercise 8 and 9, I could do something that does both of those things. Okay, so we'll talk through some examples. So typically when we think of a good workout, the first thing we want to address is movement preparation. So before I just walk in the gym and start squatting, or before I walk in the gym and start benching or deadlifting, I want to make sure I can move well. So sometimes we do foam rolling, sometimes we do static stretching, we do PNF stretching, we do dynamic stretching. Sometimes you just have muscle activations. So before somebody does like sumo deadlifts, we might have them do the machine adductor and abductor. So it sounds dorky, but it's a great way to warm up your hips and get your hips ready to move. And I've talked about in past podcasts and on our Instagram page often about like the muscles that connect into a joint. Okay, if we think of the joint like a puppet, and how a puppet has strings to it. And if I tied half of the strings in a knot, that puppet's going to move kind of crooked, right? Well, if I think of my hip or my knee or my shoulder or my elbow, there's a lot of muscles that connect to that joint. If I have some muscles that are tighter than others, it's going to move the joint incorrectly. So the big thing with movement prep is to get the musculature tightness balanced around the joint. Sometimes that can be done with, like we said, foam rolling, static stretching, dynamic stretching, muscle activations, like the machine abductor example. Sometimes we'll do like slide board stuff. We'll do pushing and pulling a sled. The idea is you're preparing your body to move the bigger, heavier weights. So the what that looks like, movement prep per person, is extremely different. So the clients I work with online, there are going to be some commonalities to their warm-ups and preps, movement preps, but there's a lot of individual variable differences, a ton, especially if they have any previous injuries. So we always have some type of preparation to address the previous injury, protect the previous injury so it never shows up again. So anybody I work with online or in person that has previous injuries, our number one goal is to fix that damn injury. So yeah, they want to get six-pack abs. Yeah, they want to get stronger. Yeah, they want to have bigger muscles. But we got to make sure you can move in 20 years. Okay? So we want to do injury prevention and injury rehab and make sure that shit never ever comes back. And then we worry about the rest of it, okay? So that's the idea of movement prep, is don't get injured. And then if you do have any injuries, address them then, make sure the body's ready to move. So movement prep is the first thing. Now, when we think of streamlining, is you could foam roll your adductor, foam roll your lower back. Maybe you can then go into static stretch, for quads, static stretch for hamstrings, static stretch for your groin. Then maybe you do some toe touchers, some walking lunges. Then all of a sudden we go to like machine adductor, abductor, then 45-degree hyperextension. So that would be kind of like a mixture of everything. We did foam rolling, we did static stretching, we did dynamic stretching, we did muscle activation with weight training. So none of that is bad, and actually all of that is fantastic. And if I can get a client who can do all of that volume and then still go move their heavier shit, they're going to be a much better, well-rounded athlete. Now, if they're in a caloric deficit, do we want to spend some of our calories in our recovery on all of that? Probably not. We probably can streamline some of that. So we might find that, yeah, they do need to foam roll maybe their adductor and maybe their lower back. But then they can go right into the adductor, abductor, and 45-degree hyper. Maybe they don't need the PNF stretches. Maybe they don't need the dynamic stretches. Or maybe they need just that middle stuff and they don't need the end stuff. So it's just trial and error. We would look through in their programming and say, okay, here's the 5 things you do for movement prep. What do you feel is the biggest bang for your buck? And they'll say, hey, if I don't do this number 1 and number 3, I know I don't have a good workout. Okay, well then let's just do 1 and 3, cut out the rest, see how it goes. So it's trial and error, educated trial and error. So that's the first thing we look at is how can I minimize what I need to do to feel ready to do my big lifts. Then when we go to our big lifts, we have strength testing is kind of the next section. And this helps us develop technique, helps us develop mental mindset. So we have the right mindset for big, heavy weights. Okay? So you have movement prep, then you have strength testing. And that improves technique and mental effort. So what we can think of is if I want to get my volume in, and say I want to do, I'm just making up stuff, okay? Say I want to do 80%, 86% of my 1 rep max, and I want to do it for 14 total reps, okay? Well, I could try to kill myself and do it in maybe a set of, let's just say 6, 5, and 3. So I got my 14, but that set of 6 kicked my ass. The set of 5 kicked my ass, and then I just got to 3, but I was pretty tired by then. So the problem is by kicking your ass with the 6 and the 5, that really dipped into your recovery. Okay? When really, if we just need the volume in, maybe I can get to 14 by just doing, 4, 4, 4, 2. And the 4s are still challenging, but they're not like murderous to me. So I don't dip into my recovery ability as badly. So you can chop your volume into more sets. You don't want to do like 14 singles, take 3 hours to do your workout and have no challenge. You just want to back off the challenge by maybe like 1 RPE. So rate of perceived exertion. So some of the people who've done powerlifting and strength-based training, they'll know what that is. But sometimes people will rank how difficult something feels from 1 to 10. 10 being like, I died doing it. 9 being like, I felt like I died doing it, but I didn't really die. So, and then maybe 8 is like, shit, that was really hard. I could probably do maybe a bit more, but that was really freaking hard. Well, instead of doing all of your sets at a 9, do them at an 8. Or if you normally do them at an 8, do them at a 7. Bring that RPE, bring down the level of intensity down a little bit. What that does, it allows you to still get all of your volume in. You get all of the important work in. You just do it at an amount of intensity that doesn't chip away as difficultly, as hardly, as immensely at your recovery ability. Okay? So that's one thing we look at. And then also the benefit of bringing down your intensity per set is it reduces collateral damage. So, if anybody has tried a hard, miserable set of 10 on squats, okay, back squats, hard, miserable set of 10 where you damn near died doing it, you're going to notice not only is your legs tired, and your glutes and your lower back, but you might also, your shoulders might be annoyed, your elbows might be annoyed, your wrists might be annoyed because you were pulling down into that bar, you were bracing super hard, your lungs are dying, all that stuff. So if I do a really hard, miserable sets for my working volume, I might run into like irritating my shoulders, I might irritate my elbows, I might irritate my wrist on back squats. Something like that. That's an example. And then all of a sudden my shoulders, elbows, and wrists require recovery. Well, that's not good if our recovery ability is already lessened. So if we bring down our intensity but we keep our volume the same, it reduces collateral damage. It reduces things getting annoyed that we don't want annoyed, that are unnecessary to be annoyed, and that would just dip into our recovery ability anyhow. Okay, so that's one idea. So we have ideas to move to streamline movement prep. We now have ideas to streamline strength testing. Then we have strength building. So what do we do to build our strength that improves our technique and our physical strength? So you think of the 3 ways you can get stronger is being technically better, so better at technique of the lift. You can get physically stronger, and you can just be mentally tougher. So strength testing tends to build technique and mental. Strength building stuff tends to build technique and physical. Now what's the difference? The strength testing is usually kind of really short duration, like 10 seconds or less, like spikes of misery. So then we have strength building, which are typically exercises that are going to take, say, 10 to 20 seconds of time and attention. There's enough volume to it, enough reps that we have to work on positioning, enough reps that we get some muscle damage, as opposed to like a 1 rep max where it's kind of an all go or no. So we got the technique of that 1 rep, we had the mindset of the 1 rep, but there really wasn't a lot of physical damage because it was almost like over too fast. So when we think of our strength building stuff, how we can streamline there is to layer the purposes of what we do. So for example, sometimes I'll see people, in order to get like their squat better or their deadlift. Let's go with the conventional deadlift. I saw somebody recently, they were doing an exercise. I'm going to change it up a little bit so they don't think I'm talking about them, even though I am talking about them. So let's say that a person was doing narrow stance leg press to work their quads. And they were also doing farmer's carries to work their core bracing. Well, those are 2 exercises. So both of them are going to kind of chip away at recovery. And they both, when you add them together, have maybe a considerable amount of time and attention. Whereas, if I did slow eccentric front squats, that's going to annihilate my quads, and that's going to work my bracing. But it's all done in one exercise. So if I did slow eccentric front squats, and especially if I used a Duffalo or a camber bar where I don't have to worry about the bar rolling, that reduces stress on my biceps, that reduces stress on my shoulders. I get the challenge of upper back and core bracing, but I also get my quads at the same time. So rather than me needing to do 2 exercises, each of which will dip into my recovery ability, I can just do 1 exercise that does both of those things, and then I only have 1 exercise to recover from. Okay, so that's one example. So trying to find layered purposes and layered benefits to each exercise. Then typically after movement prep, strength testing, and strength building, we have like related accessories. Okay, so what our goal there is that's physical development. So no longer technique, because they're probably exercises that aren't like specifically related to technique. So let's think of like bench press. So if I want to get better at bench press, I might think to do chest flies and tricep extensions. Well, the technique of a chest fly really doesn't transfer, immensely over to a barbell benching, and like skull crushers don't exactly transfer over to a bench press either. So that's not really technique development. It's not even mindset development. It's just physical development. So we're getting physical development out of our related accessories. And another example there of layering purposes or layering benefits is instead of flies and tricep extensions, maybe I can just do dips. So dips done correctly annihilate my chest and my triceps. So again, I now only have 1 exercise I have to recover from rather than 2. So I burn less calories and I require less recovery. So that is what you want to do through your training, is streamline your training. Try to combine things that can kill many birds with 1 stone. Try to streamline things that you don't think are 100% necessary, and maybe bring your strength testing down 1 RPE. And that might help to reduce your recovery requirements per workout. But you still got all of your volume of work in, and you still got all the stimulus you need to increase each area of strength. Okay? Technique, mental, and physical. Cool. So that's an idea. So these are some quick little tips that we can use, nutrition-wise and training-wise. Cool? So, if you're eating less, you have to do less. But that doesn't mean less quality, it just means less quantity. So find out how to maintain your quality or even improve your quality while decreasing your quantity of exercise. Cool. Now, real quick, what if somebody said, well, instead of me eating less to lose fat, why don't I just do more? So that's the equation usually for fat loss. We kind of simplify it to, eat less or do more, or eat less and do more. Eat less, move more kind of thing. So if somebody says, well, I'll just do more. I'll just add a cardio. I'll just add this. I'll just add that. I'll just add this. Well, doing more stuff increases your recovery requirement. Okay? So if I do more, but I keep my calories the same, by keeping my calories the same, I have kept my recovery ability the same. So if I just add more shit, how am I going to recover from that? That will negatively impact your strength training because now you're doing other stuff that competes with the recovery of your strength training. So you can't just add more and more shit to everything you do and expect your strength training to go well because your recovery has not increased. You're adding more stuff to the same amount of recovery that you've always had. Not going to work well, right? So that's not the goal we want to go with. So that would be kind of like a no-no. So by being able to improve your workload, in the long run, it does improve ability. Okay? Very, very long run. But in the short term, if you're trying to lose fat now, this is not a good time to take on hypertrophy methods. This is not a good time to increase volume workload. None of that shit. Okay? Do that in the off season or do that when you're just trying to hold weight or actually trying to gain weight. That's when you try to do high volume stuff. Okay? So for now, if you're going to reduce calories, you're reducing your recovery ability. Therefore, you need to streamline your training. And you need to maximize the calories you are eating. Okay? So, quick summary is eat around your training to fuel your training and then reduce calories at other times of the day. That'll still give you an overall for 24 hours per day. You'll have more hours of that day spent in a deficit, so therefore you'll still get fat loss. Streamline your training to lessen recovery needs. So since your recovery ability is lessened by your nutrition, make sure you don't try to, make sure you bring your recovery needs down to match what you're eating. Okay? And then, little tip, if you can, sleep more. So sleep as much as you can to help with recovery from training since you don't have the calories to recover from training. Cool? Okay. So hopefully this gave you some insight that is new and useful for you. So if you have any questions on how to implement this, so if you like the advice and you're like, that sounds pretty smart, but how the hell do I do that? Shoot us an email and I'll help you out, okay? So our email is brutalirongym@gmail.com. So if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, Brutal Iron Gym. Also, if you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. So the more people we help, the happier the world will be. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. So this podcast was actually a suggestion from our Instagram page. So thank you. Please let us know. So this podcast is for you, so we want to know what you want to learn about. Okay? And you can always reach us at our email, brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.